Time is relative. The human timescale seems to run in a linear fashion, but for technology, the timescale is exponential. For some people out there, last year's iPhone is already obsolete. But if technology really has a different timescale, then why would you want to buy, use, or review a 10-year-old camera? Very simple. It's not about the specs or the tech itself. It never has been, at least for me. It's all about the shooting experience, how it feels to use the camera, and the results you can get with it. Hi friends, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Jorge. On this channel we talk about photography and filmmaking, merging creativity and productivity to live a fulfilling life. And in today's video, this is it. Today we are talking about what many people consider to be one of the best bangs for the bucks for street photography, or even the best entry-level Fuji camera, the Fujifilm X-E1. This is a standalone review, not a direct comparison between the X-E1 and the X Pro 1. I will make a dedicated comparison video later. The stamps will be linked down below in case you would like to skip to another chapter, but for now, let's get started. I do not enjoy talking about specs, but this camera is not 1 gen or 2 gens behind. This is the original, the very first one of that line. So we have to refresh our memory in terms of what the specs are and what the camera is capable of. Let's get this out of the way so we can focus on the shooting experience, which is the thing that matters, to me at least. It has a 16.3 megapixel APS-C X-Trans sensor, the same sensor you can find on the X Pro 1. That is important, more on that later. The native ISO ranges from 200 to 6400 with extended ranges on both the low end and the high end as well. The mechanical shutter speed maxes out at 1/4000 of a second, and the camera has no electronic shutter and no built-in ND filter, so you will definitely need one of these, more on that later. If you have watched any of my previous videos or reviews, then you know that I personally prefer the rangefinder style cameras. But unlike the X Pro 1 or the X100 series, this camera only offers the electronic viewfinder, no optical viewfinder here. That being said, the X-E1 does have a diopter adjustment dial, thank God. And the viewfinder itself has a 2.3 million dot OLED display, which is pretty decent and a noticeable improvement over the X Pro 1. Autofocusing is somewhat slow unless you use the AFL button, or back button focusing as I do. That works every time for me, so keep that in mind. But if you like to know how to set up the AFL button and how to shoot with the back button focusing, then you can check this video, linked in the description down below. You also have a built-in pop-up flash. More on this later. If you're doing a very specific type of photography where your results truly depend on the gear that you're using and the specs and the capabilities, then by all means choose gear based on specs. But focusing only on features and specs is usually not the way to go. It can be beneficial to help us navigate the camera landscape and narrow down and inform our purchasing decisions. That can be valid. That being said, specs are not everything. Therefore, as I said in my X Pro 1 review, comparing an older camera, in this case the X-E1, to a newer camera and try to assess it that way is not the way to go. You're setting it up for failure because by default it will be worse than anything else you're gonna compare it to. So from the get-go, I'll say that this camera will be slower than any smartphone or any other somewhat modern camera. But the image quality, the electronic viewfinder, and the overall results are incredible if you have the patience to take it slow, to make the most out of it, and almost treat it like a film camera. The 16.3 megapixel in the X-E1 is good enough. In fact, it's the same megapixel amount and resolution as my first camera, the X100T. 16.3 megapixels is more than enough for printing photo books or even larger prints as well. The native ISO tops at 6400, and although the expanded ISO can go even higher, I would suggest staying under the 3200 range to get cleaner files. Otherwise, the noise will be noticeable and the low light performance is not great. The built-in simulations and colors are great. This is probably one of the strongest features of the camera, especially if you shoot as I do, JPEG only, manual mode, and using back button focusing. The color science and the results are some of the reasons why people like me look past all the negatives or the cons of cameras like this. However, the most important feature or reason is the following one. This is probably the most important feature of the X-E1 and the X Pro 1 as well. I have mentioned before how the first gen X-Trans sensor has an organic film-like look that is hard to replicate in newer, faster cameras. Even cameras like my X100V are too clinical, too clean, too sharp, and with every new generation of cameras, the magic sauce of the first X-Trans sensor seems to decrease. This sensor is very flexible. It allows us to customize the profiles, to play with the custom white balance, to use simulation recipes and create our own as well. You can easily find film simulation recipes and presets online, like my own custom black and white simulation recipe specifically made for the first X-Trans sensor, posted on my website. Places like Fuji Weekly are great for a larger library of simulations, including the simulation that I use the most, the fake classic chrome. Every single color photograph shown in this review were taken with the fake classic chrome, and every black and white photograph shown in this review was taken with my own black and white custom profile. Another favorite of mine is the X100p Instagram account. Really cool stuff, go check it out. Links to all of these sites in the description down below. One of my key findings here is that some of these simulation recipes require you to bump the ISO in order to be able to select a higher dynamic range in camera. Some of my favorite film simulation recipes, like the fake classic chrome, set the dynamic range to 200%, which means you need to bump your ISO to 400 to be able to enable it inside the camera. This, in turn, means that you absolutely need an ND filter, especially if you want to shoot outside in summer or in bright sunny days. Trying to shoot at f2 or even f2.8 at ISO 400 with a max shutter speed of 1/4000 of a second is almost impossible. I wish the camera had a built-in ND filter, but regardless, save yourself a headache and pick one of these up. ND8 and ND16 work best for me. All of that being said, having the first X-Trans sensor is the most important feature of the X-E1. Sharing the same sensor as the X Pro 1, having the same organic look and feel that is hard to replicate on newer cameras, and being able to share the same custom recipes and simulations is the key here. One of the most important things that people consider when changing camera ecosystems are the lenses, the variety, the flexibility, and the options. And after a lot of research and using these cameras for a while, I am pleasantly surprised to see the available options out there. From the high-end range, like all the brand new Fuji f1.4 prime lenses, which are really high quality but really high price, to the smaller, lighter and snappy Fujichrons, great image quality with a reasonable price tag, but also third-party like the Veltrox lenses, which seem to be good quality at a decent price. Or the low-end range but still quite popular options like the 7 Artisan lenses. These are affordable options that offer a full manual experience. And last but not least, just adapt all film lenses if you want to. Nikkor, Canon, Minolta, you name it. If you're wondering which lenses should you choose to start your photography journey with, then check out some of the ones I have reviewed on this channel, linked in the description down below. Also, I will be reviewing one of the cheapest options available, the 7 Artisan's 25mm f1.8 lens, in the next couple of weeks, effectively making this particular camera and lens combo the cheapest way to get into the Fuji ecosystem. Stay tuned for that. This camera is very small and it's very light. In fact, it's so small that the Fujinon 23mm f2 lens looks massive. The 7 Artisan's 25mm lens looks more reasonable, and if you're using the camera with a 28mm f2 pancake lens, then it will be a very compact and light setup. I have mentioned this before, but I love the look of these types of cameras. The tactile knobs and the dials and the rangefinder style viewfinder. This is my preferred way to control the camera and to change the settings. I don't like navigating menus and deep diving looking for a specific setting. And even though the newly announced Fujifilm flagship camera, the X-H2S, is moving away from that, I still prefer my knobs and my dials, and I still prefer these types of cameras. Having quick access to some of the most important settings like your aperture ring, if your lens supports it, the shutter speed dial, and the shutter compensation dial are the way to go. And although you don't have a dedicated ISO dial, you do have quick access to a custom function button that allows you to access the ISO quickly, or any other setting that you want to assign to it. You also have a second custom function button. The down arrow on the D-pad is also customizable as well. The viewfinder is decent, with higher resolution than the previous cameras, the X100 and the X Pro 1. And you also have a diopter adjustment dial, much more convenient than having to buy correction lenses online like the X Pro 1. And the last thing I want to mention is that this camera is not weather sealed, so plan accordingly for that. I have mentioned in my X100V review the importance of weather sealing and show you why I need it. Links in the description down below. The shooting experience is what really matters. The dials, the manual settings, the compact body, the lightweight form factor, it all adds up. I love the mechanical shutter sound and how the camera feels when you take a photograph. But just like I mentioned in my X Pro 1 review, people can hear it and will notice it versus shooting with a noiseless shutter like the X100 series. Keep that in mind. And although I really enjoy using the camera and it's really fun to use, there's a couple things that I have to mention that fit into this particular category. I know some of these things have been fixed in newer iterations or different models, however, if you're buying this camera, then you need to know nonetheless. The autofocus is slow. I personally use the back button focusing method, so this does not affect me too much, but yes, it is slow. And that is important to know because of the marketing used when it was released and the demographic that this camera was intended for. This camera was made for the average everyday person, small, light, and this brings me to the flash. It's a gimmick. If you intend to learn the craft, master the settings, and seriously want to learn photography, then don't use the flash. You don't need it. To start wrapping things up, this is a great camera. It's really fun to use. It helps me stay motivated and helps me capture moments in time and create memories, which is the most important thing about this entire endeavor, in my opinion. So, on one hand, we can say that it has incredible image quality, with a very organic film-like look thanks to the first X-Trans sensor. The autofocus is slow, but you can work around it if you use the AFL button or the back button focusing method. Keep this in mind. It has a great flexible mount that allows lots of options for lenses if you're on a tight budget or you just want to experiment and test new things. It can get really clean files if you stayed under 64 or 3200 ISO. I recommend 3200. The cost of the camera is very low compared to some of the newer cameras out there and compared to the used X Pro 1 market. The diopter adjustment dial is really a great thing to have, and it's just a good looking camera. That matters to me. On the other hand, the camera has no optical viewfinder. It also lacks weather sealing, and that is definitely something that matters to me. It also lacks a built-in ND filter, but this is just my opinion. I understand that this is not a feature that most people care about. And last but not least, although the camera is very affordable, it can be difficult to find depending on your region and the used marketplace in that region. To be clear and transparent, I paid 180 Canadian dollars for the body and 350 Canadian dollars for the Fuji 23mm lens. Or, if you prefer, I paid around 100 Canadian dollars for the 7 Artisan's 25mm f1.8 lens. And that is all you need to get started. It's cheaper than the X Pro 1, easier to find than the X Pro 1, and has most of the features of the X Pro 1 as well. for the most part, so I still personally prefer the X Pro 1, but this is a great starting point. A great way to start your photography journey, a great way to get into the Fuji ecosystem, and a great way to get you started and going. So if you're serious about photography and you want to invest in gear that will help you get started or advance your craft even further without breaking the bank, then this is it, the X-E1. So that is the X-E1, an affordable, quirky camera with really high image quality and results. I really enjoy using it and I highly recommend it to anybody starting their photography journey or wanting to bump up from a smartphone or a point-and-shoot camera. As always, I'm curious to hear what you guys think. Have you used the X-E cameras? Have you used the X Pro cameras? Do you have a preference between the two? Share your thoughts in a comment down below. But that is it for today's video. If you found this video helpful or valuable, then please consider liking, subscribing, and joining a YouTube membership as well. Thank you very much for watching, for giving me your time and your energy, and good luck with your creative process.